Profesorica Reisman je, za razliku od onoga što smo mogli čuti u nekim našim medijima, vrlo ugledna i svjetski poznata osoba. Ona, osim što je dakle sada visiting profesor na University of Law, Liberty University, Virginia, obnaša i funkciju ravnateljice Liberty Child Protection Center. Veliki dio svog života posvetila je pravima djece, obrušavajući se na seksualno i svako drugo zlostavljanje djece. I u životu je objavila niz knjiga koje su postale svjetski poznate, među njima recimo Soft Porn Plays Hardball, 1991. godina, Kinsey, Crime and Consequences iz 2000. godine i Sexual Sabotage, objavljenom 2010. godine. Jučer je u Sheratonu u Zagrebu bilo službeno predstavljanje hrvatskog prijevoda njezine knjige Sexual Sabotage, dakle to je prvi puta da možemo čitati doktoricu Reisman na hrvatskom jeziku. Evo ukratko, samo, dakle, to je bilo ono što je vrijedno da znate o doktorici Reisman, koja je višestruko nagrađivana za svoj rad, dobila je brojna priznanja i doista je poznata u cijelome svijetu. Zatim, naš gost danas sjedi s lijeve strane profesorici Reisman je gospodin Thomas Hampson. On je inače pravnik. Završio je dakle različite poslijediplomske studije uglavnom u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama koje su se odnosile recimo na problematiku, sad ću govoriti opet na engleski, Air Force Intelligence, pa zatim bavio se organiziranim kriminalom, korupcijom u politici i poseban dio svojeg istraživačkog rada posvetio je istraživanju djece. Kad sam ga pitao je li on znanstvenik, on mi je rekao, pa nisam znanstvenik, I'm not a hard scientist, dakle nisam fizičar, kemičar, biolog i tako dalje. I'm social scientist, jel? Dakle, postoji nešto što se zove social science, dakle, dr. Hampson je vrlo poznati znanstvenik u području sociologije i prava. Objavio je brojna djela i dobio je brojne nagrade. Tako da on je trenutno u bliskoj suradnji sa doktoricom Reisman i obnaša funkciju direktora za istraživanje u Child Protection Center pri Liberty University u Virginiji. Putuje po svijetu i angažiran je na mnogim područjima, bavi se različitim istraživanjima, istragama, ima vrlo impresivan opus, tako da nemamo vremena podrobno dalje razrađivati sve ono što je učinio, ali mislim da je ovo radi informacije dovoljno. I na kraju, gospodin Tim Tate, on nam dolazi iz Engleske, iz Velike Britanije. On je novinar, on kaže za sebe da je filmmaker, dakle uglavnom kao producent, i isto tako je vrlo aktivan u promicanju ljudskih prava, od toga da se naravno bori protiv pedofilije i izrabljivanja djece, do toga da se isto tako bavi problemom političke korupcije, bavi se nekim pravnim pitanjima, jer je po svom obrazovanju završio pravo i teologiju, i bavi se poviješću Prvoga svjetskog rata. Tako da je do danas gospodin Tim Tate objavio 11 knjiga, od kojih je otprilike polovica posvećena zlostavljanju djece, odnosno usmjerena protiv zlostavljanja djece, a polovica je povijesnog karaktera i bavi se problematikom Prvoga svjetskog rata. On je i novinar kojeg angažiraju vodeće svjetske novine, kao što je Sunday Times Observer, pa onda Guardian, nemam što posebno govoriti o tome što znači Guardian u svjetskom novinarstvu, Daily Telegraph, Daily Express, New Statement, Broadcast Magazine. Dakle, to je otprilike ono što vam imam zakazati o gospodinu Timu Tateu i to da je Amnesty International Award winner 1994. godine. Zanimljivo je isto tako reći, uvodno, a to je za sve one koji misle da se radi o jednoj skupini ljudi koja je ideološki isključiva, koja je izrazito religijski obojena, koja nastupa neznanstveno i tako dalje, da su naši gosti po svojim nekakvim svjetonazorskim, religijskim uvjerenjima u biti vrlo različite osobe. Gospođa dr. Reisman je pripadnica židovskog naroda, dio njezine obitelji živi u Izraelu, dio njezine obitelji je stradao u holokaustu za vrijeme Drugog svjetskog rata. Dakle, to je što se tiče doktorice Reisman. Gospodin Hampson je protestant, a gospodin Tim Tate je agnostik. Svi su oni udružili svoj intelektualni rad i godine svojeg istraživanja u službi obrane prava djeteta i drugih ljudskih prava i zbog toga teško da postoji primjerenije mjesto od Medicinskog fakulteta da čujemo ono što nam imaju reći i što su rekli u velikom dijelu civiliziranog svijeta. Oni će održati svoje izlaganja, nakon toga vas pozivamo i oni vas pozivaju i ja vas pozivam na raspravu. Pitanja trebaju biti kratka, ne bi trebala biti dulja od 30 sekundi, tako da naši gosti mogu odgovarati. I samo prije nego im dam riječ, treba naglasiti da je ovaj naš današnji susret organiziran od naše novo osnovane udruge mladih liječnika Hrvatskog liječničkog zbora koju vodi dr. Branko Relić, pa je zatim ovaj susret organizirala i naša studentska organizacija, fakultetska, dakle studentski zbor sveučilišta u Zagrebu na čelu sa gospodinom Vedranom Ragužem, studentom 6. godine i naravno Medicinski fakultet sveučilišta u Zagrebu kojeg predstavljam ja kao dekan danas, ja sam Dan Miličić. So, distinguished guests, I took a freedom to present you on creation because I think it was more appropriate. This is Croatian speaking audience, but they all understand English and they will all enjoy and fully understand your lectures. So first, I have an honor to invite Professor Reisman to give us... No? Oh, sorry. Mr. Tim Tate. Okay. Okay, no problem.
If you don't mind, guys, I'm going to perch on the edge of this table because it's a little more comfortable. I don't. Do you need translation? We have a translator. Would you like one? No? Okay, that's good. Okay. Good evening. And before we start, and on behalf of my colleagues here, I'd like to express our thanks to the Dean and to this institution for hosting us this evening, and to yourselves for being here. So, a round of applause for you guys. As the Deans, I think, said, the format for tonight's discussion is that there are 3 speakers here on the platform, and then following them it's over to you for discussion and debate and questions. And all the 3 of us feel that this part, the discussion, the debate, your questions, your input, are the most important part of the evening. So we're all going to keep our remarks as economical as possible, so as many of you who want to speak and ask and question and debate have the time, the maximum time to do that. So what's this evening about? I want to start with what it's not about. Tonight is not about religion. Tonight is not about politics. Tonight is about science. It's about the science of sex and the science of sex research. Which means we have to deal with Alfred Kinsey, because Alfred Kinsey was the father of sex research. Almost 70 years ago, Kinsey published two major books, the first of two major books, Sexual Behaviour in the Human Male, followed by Sexual Behaviour in the Human Female. They revolutionised attitudes to sex worldwide, and they were the direct causes of fundamental changes in law and in society's attitude to sex and in what our children are taught about sex. While some reassessment was, I think, inevitable in a post-World War II world, and frankly, in my view, much needed. Just one example, in one state in America, it was illegal. It was against the law to laugh while you were having sex. Those were the kind of laws that I think probably needed a little updating. But Kinsey's most revolutionary and notable argument was not about whether you should laugh during sex, but was whether children were sexual. And he argued that children were sexual beings from birth, that they could enjoy sex from birth. As a consequence of this argument, everything we know and think and teach about children and sex changed from that moment on. So, where did this argument come from, and is it scientifically valid? And there are three reasons why I think we need to question that. Kinsey told us that his conclusion that children are sexual beings from birth and can enjoy sex from birth derived from scientific study. We're going to show you, we're going to argue, and I think we're going to prove, that Kinsey broke every fundamental tenet of science and scientific research to produce that. The second reason is that ever since the publication of those two Kinsey volumes, he and the institute which today bears his name have refused to allow any normal academic evaluation of the raw data which he said supported his conclusion. And the third reason is that despite both of these two problems, his doctrine that children are sexual from birth has determined child protection policy worldwide, certainly in the West and now increasingly further east. Why was Kinsey's suggestion, his argument, so revolutionary? The reason is that prior to Kinsey, policy in industrialized countries had been to recognize that children need protection against early sexual activity. From as early as the beginning of the 19th century, most industrialized countries began to introduce age of consent laws below which children were not legally allowed to have sex, nor were adults allowed to have sex with them. By the end of the Second World War, which is at the time Kinsey is sitting there writing his volumes, age of consent laws were the norm, and they reflected a belief, an understanding, that children and childhood need to be insulated from the emotional and physical damage which can accrue from premature sexual activity. So Kinsey's argument in 1948 that children were sexual from birth and can enjoy sex from birth was, in his words, a bombshell. He was then a tenured professor at an American university. So his book, his work, carried not only the imprimatur of a genuine academic community, but he claimed and argued that his conclusions were scientifically proven. And I remind you, I'm arguing here tonight that what we're talking about is science. So, where did Kinsey get his facts? Where did he get his raw data to support his new science? He got this information, he says this, not me, he got this information from paedophiles. He invited paedophiles, these are his words, not mine, to submit reports of their sexual contact with children. According to his closest colleagues who I interviewed, he did more than that. He actively commissioned paedophiles to go out and to sexually assault children and babies, and directed the research which they carried out. For clarity, this involved the extended and repeated masturbation and penetration of 2,035 babies and infants and children. Not my figures, his figures. Actions which Kinsey and his colleagues knew, admit, and say were illegal and often caused pain. An ethical question, if I may. Is it ever scientifically justifiable to perform illegal and painful experiments on those who are either unwilling or unable to consent? Does the end, the scientific end, justify the means? An example, an analogy, a parallel, if you will. Kinsey's experiments were conducted before and during the years of World War II. At the same time, in Nazi Germany, a doctor called Josef Mengele was conducting cruel and appalling scientific experiments on the inmates of concentration camps. Some of those had a clear and indeed understandable goal, for example, to investigate the effects on the human body of immersion in freezing water, so as to save or provide better protection to Luftwaffe pilots who were downed in the ocean. Today, we universally recognize those experiments, Mengele's experiments, as barbaric and unjustifiable. Indeed, they formed part of the Nuremberg trials in 1947 and 1948. Why then do Kinsey's experiments, equally barbaric, equally painful, equally illegal, why then do they not attract the same condemnation? Next, the circumstances in which these experiments are carried out. It's a fundamental tenet of science that for an experiment to be valid, it must be conducted impartially, and that the data which derives from it must be properly recorded and subject to examination. The paedophiles who Kinsey encouraged or commissioned all self-reported. They carried out their experiments on babies and children alone, and, according to Kinsey at least, with no supervision. No one examined, much less questioned, the results which these paedophiles reported. Kinsey simply published them, and he published them as evidence that children enjoyed these experiments. One example, and I know Judith will give you more. Table 34, if it's up there, of Kinsey's first book described the timed masturbation of children and babies by an adult paedophile over a 24-hour period. And it purported to record the length of time it took these children to reach what the paedophile, and only the paedophile, asserted was orgasm. We're here today in an academic institution. We should ask ourselves whether this university would ever permit, much less accept without evaluation, research carried out by someone with a direct interest in a favourable outcome. An analogy. Would this university, would any university, allow a researcher funded by a drug company to carry out experiments on that company's products, unmonitored and unsupervised? Would any university then accept without question whether such a compromised researcher's assertion that the drug was safe and should be widely used, would they accept that without any supervision? Would you? That's exactly what Kinsey did with his paedophiles, and it is exactly that which he published, and it is exactly that which is the sole basis for the assertion that children are sexual from birth and that they enjoy sex with adults. Is that science? Is it good science? Is it any form of science? I'm not a scientist. You are. I think it's a fair question. Then there's the question of what happened since. The single most fundamental rule of scientific research is the concept of peer review, yes? In any reputable academic establishment like this one, the results of scientific experiments must be evaluated and examined by other scientists and researchers. Pretty standard stuff, isn't it? Kinsey's self-proclaimed scientific data has never in 70 years been subjected to any peer review. Worse, Kinsey's institute refuses to allow any access to that data. It alone determines what the data says. Again, I ask, is this science? Despite this, the United States, much of Europe, has accepted Kinsey's assertion that children are sexual from birth, and it has predicated policy, both child protection policy and policy for the education of children about sex, on this premise. On the premise, on the say-so, the sole word of paedophiles. Surely public policy should be based on solid research, on solid science, not the assertions of those with a vested interest in the outcome. And you might ask, as you sit here tonight, what's this got to do with me? What possible connection between us sitting here in Zagreb is there with something that happened 70 years ago, thousands of miles away? There are two reasons. Two. The first is that there is a new initiative. First in 70 years, the first time anyone has tried this, to have the Kinsey Institute made to open up its books, to expose its data, and to justify what it's done. And that initiative follows an acceptance of the Kinsey Institute for official status at the United Nations. The initiative says, suspend that, examine the Kinsey Institute, make it justify its work. And the second follows on from that, because the UN status which the Kinsey Institute now has gives it a seat at the table. It gives it a voice in international policy, and that policy determines child sex education. Last year, that caused something of a row here. Your Constitutional Court got involved. There is still an ongoing debate, and the civil initiative, which some of the people here are part, wants that re-evaluated because of the basis, the Kinseyan basis of that. Those are the two reasons why it affects you personally. But there is another reason. We stand this evening in a medical school. A medical school. As doctors, you will, I think this happens in Croatia, all of you swear or affirm the Hippocratic Oath. That commits you, and I quote, to the utmost respect for human life from its beginning. Your working lives will be framed within this commitment, and I know you will live up to it every day. But I would also ask you to consider your oath in the form that you'll affirm it, and consider where it came from. It came from an updated version of the Hippocratic Oath, a version which was updated by the World Medical Association in 1948 in Geneva. And that's where that form of words come from. And that updating was done specifically, the WMA says, as a direct response to the crimes of what it called the shame and the tragedy of the German medical experience under Nazi rule, and in particular to the appalling experiments carried out by Dr. Mengele and others. And I would urge you to consider whether, as doctors and as scientists, you have a duty today to examine the fraudulent science based on cruel and illegal experiments sold by Dr. Kinsey to a trusting world. If you believe, as I do, that you do have this duty, then I urge you to listen to what Dr. Riesman has to say and to do as I did and carefully examine the evidence she has uncovered about Kinsey's experiments. I come from a different tradition to Dr. Riesman. I'm a socialist, I'm an agnostic, I'm not of her persuasion. I examined every dot and comma of her research, and I didn't want at the outset to believe it. But so clear is the evidence that I had to accept it. So please, do as I did. Listen first, then question, research. And when you come to the truth, I urge you not to push it to one side as too difficult or uncomfortable to face, but to deal with it and to question and to take it further. I believe that's your duty as it was mine, but I believe it's your duty particularly as doctors, as academicians, as citizens of the world, but above all, as scientists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lady from the audience approached to me and asked me, why don't we have translation? And my answer was, we are on the School of Medicine and we don't need translation, but all of you are not medical students and not medical doctors. So I will take a liberty just to summarize what you have told in several sentences. Dakle, počeli smo s time da je danas riječ o znanosti i da je glavna tema kritika Kinseyevog rada doktora Kinseya, koji je najveći dio svojih istraživanja obavljao u Sjedinjenim Državama za vrijeme Drugog svjetskog rata. Ono na čemu se ponajviše temelje njegova istraživanja seksualnosti djece jesu njegovi kontakti s pedofilima i aktivno pozivanje pedofila koji su trebali izvijestiti o tome kako djeca reagiraju na različite seksualne podražaje. Ta djeca su bila izlagana masturbiranju, bila su izlagana penetraciji itd. I zaključci takvih, pod navodnicima, istraživanja su bili ti da su djeca od najranije dobi seksualna bića i na temelju tih kvaziznanstvenih radova je kasnije osnovan Kinseyev institut koji je postao savjetodavno tijelo Ujedinjenih naroda i na temelju tih nekih zaključaka su stvarani pa i neki moderni programi spolnog odgoja i zdravstvenog odgoja djece. Istraživanja Kinseya mogu se usporediti s istraživanjima nacističkih liječnika u Drugom svjetskom ratu. Mengele je dobro poznata paradigma u kojima su isto tako obavljali totalno neetične eksperimente na ljudima koji su primjerice bili uranjeni u ledenu vodu da bi se vidjelo šta će piloti Luftwaffea kad se sruše njihovi avioni, kako će oni najbolje moći fizički odreagirati, kako ih se može pripremiti da što bolje podnesu takve ekstremne uvjete i da vam ne govorim što su sve radili nacistički liječnici u ratu. I naravno, ono što je sasvim jasno, nije znanost zapravo ono što nije reproducibilno, ono što nije bilo u kontroliranim uvjetima i ono što nije bilo, dakle, izloženo onome što se zove peer review, dakle, analizi, kritici stručnjaka koji mogu onda dati svoje objekcije. A ja ću još dodati i nešto za što se mi sami neprekidno zalažemo, da znanost ne može biti ništa što je usmjereno protiv dobrobiti čovjeka i što iskorištava bilo kojeg pacijenta, pa i životinju danas. I vi znate kako su vrlo striktna pravila koja nam dopuštaju eksperimente na ljudima i životinjama i kako su ovakvi, da je takvo okružje kao što je nekad vladalo u Kinseyjevom istraživačkom timu i takav način rada apsolutno neprihvatljiv. I kao što to nije znanost, jer je usmjerena zapravo protiv čovjeka i gazi ljudska prava, tako isto i s umjetnošću i sa svakom ljudskom djelatnošću. Dakle, to je negacija ljudskosti koja mora biti ugrađena u temelje svega što čovjek radi da bi zavrijedilo ikakvu pozornost. Od umjetnosti, arhitekture, znanosti, medicine i tako dalje. Eto, to je bio sukus onoga što smo čuli, a sada, now I'm giving back my mic to you and then you decide who is the second speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, somebody come here because we weren't here earlier, and which group? So, yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Dean. I really appreciated that in Croatian because now it's much clearer to me than it was before, you know. And also it was shorter, yeah. Okay. So that was wonderful, and I love hearing everything, all that information in Croatian. I wish I could speak, but I haven't managed in the last week or so to learn. So I'll abandon, except I can say može. And hvala. Okay, hvala. Okay. I'm going to be really brief because Tim covered so much, so I don't have to say much. And it's always good to hear another person like Tim be indignant, as he should be outraged, as he should be amazed, as he should be, by the Kinsey lifelong attempts to change and right now ability to change the world. And I feel not at all to our advantage. So, Dr. Kinsey, he was world famous. You're nobody here. No, you're too young too. But when he was called the most famous man for a decade, this was during World War II and following World War II. And he is the founder of sex education, as you know it, and as I know it, and as the world knows it. And if we're going to follow Kinsey, we'll have to say, who was he? Following the Kinsey model, he was a criminal, he was a sexual psychopath, as is defined by psychopathology, a sadomasochist, a bisexual, pornographically addicted, masturbator, and pedophile. If we follow the layout, the views, the behaviors of such a man, this should result in a massive increase in these very same behaviors. This should. And looking at the United States and worldwide, I don't have time to go over this, and a lot of it's small. Go on my website, and it's there. But there's been a huge change from 1948 In 1953, with the infusion of pornography and Kinsey, to today, I had to stop my research in '88, but we're going to be continuing it on, to today's lessons or today's clusters of terms that are describing crimes in society. They're crimes as defined by the New York Index of the New York Reader's Index and Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. There has been this huge change from 69, 73. Child pornography was first mentioned as a term in 1975. 1975. In 1977, incest and child abuse became clusters, terms that were referred to in the popular press. From then, 1960, we had lust murder was a term, a cluster that was referred to in the popular press. Child sex rings in 82, 95, 94, serial rape became something that was identified, and autoerotic asphyxiation. Do you deal with that? That is masturbation to the point of death, accidental. And then not so accidental, then we moved to ritual killing and so on. Post the era, sex trafficking, child sex traffic, hooking up in teens and so on. That's a change in human behavior. These are massive changes in human behavior over that period of time. And in 1980, this man, anybody know him? Anybody? There's a very famous television commentator. He said, "We've based an entire generation of sexologists on Kinsey, and Kinsey was a dirty old man." And they said, but he wasn't really. Donahue was very, very enamored of Kinsey. And this other man, who Tim Tate has interviewed in his film, Kinsey's Pedophile, Kinsey's photographer said, Kinsey listened to pedophiles. They were very careful. They used stopwatches. They knew how to record their thing. They were trained observers. And this is one of the famous tables. Now, if you have Kinsey's books in the medical library, you'll be able to find these tables. There are 5 of them. This is table 34. That's a 5-month-old baby. This is a 4-year-old boy. This boy had, he said, Kinsey, 26 orgasms in a 24-hour period. How do you do that? How do you know? Who did that to the boy? Who did that to these children? They described what Kinsey called an orgasm. And it included, it's on page 160, 161 of Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, and it was screaming, crying, collapsing, fainting, striking the man who was abusing, he didn't say abusing, striking the man, the partner. Now, this baby had a partner. A partner? We have to constantly be concerned about the way we use language. That's not a partner. When you're raped, the rapist isn't your partner. When you're robbed, the person who robs you is not your partner. Is that easy to, is that clear? Okay. He called that an orgasm. And when I looked it up, what he called an orgasm. He described the fainting and this convulsions and all that sort of thing. Now, there's the fellow was a virgin in college, and he read Kinsey, and he said, "I will become Kinsey's pamphleteer." That was Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy. This is a little girl with breasts on her, and she's going to charge her father or some other man $40 for sex. And this, a teenager, these are all, I have an enormous collection of child pornography from Playboy. I won against Playboy. They accused me of libeling and slandering them when I said they were a child pornographer. I won against them in the Netherlands. I say if you can win in the Netherlands against Playboy on child pornography, you can win anywhere. The judge ruled in my favor. He said, "She's right. These are children. That's what the material is." Anyway, so we know that popular views of sex were promoted by Kinsey's pamphleteer, Playboy, and popular views of sex were promoted just as the sex, from a scientific point of view, were promoted by Kinsey. Now, what about sex education? This is the dean, the director, no offense. Excuse me. The dean of the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. This was the fundamental place that you went to get a degree, a PhD, an education degree, a sex training degree in human sexuality. Some of the courses I could spend some time talking to you about, but we'll move that to another time. And this was the director, and this was the dean, who is describing how to masturbate. These were the people who are educating, creating the curriculum globally now, which would be used to educate people about sexuality. Really, that doesn't appear to be the kind of reasonable people, educated and so forth, that you would necessarily want to educate you about sexuality. Yeah? They had a conflict of interest. That is Stuhlhofer, one of your educators, who came from the Kinsey Institute to bring sex education to Croatia. He was trained there. He's on a program. That's Kinsey on the television, and that's his wife. He tucked his wife in for whatever purposes at different times. This is the kind of sex education that he would bring, and you are dealing with today in Croatia. The European Committee for Social Rights said the low percentage of sexually transmitted diseases in teen pregnancies in Croatia as compared to the rest of Europe. Croatia was in a very good position, and yet we would now change things very radically. I'm going to spend quickly some time on the way the brain works. Most of you study the brain. The child's brain is not capable and should not be exposed to stimuli as of a sexual nature when they are undeveloped. They activate the amygdala more than the frontal lobe. This is not consensual, and the response in the organs will be a combination of fear, shame, and arousal. And people, young people in particular, are going to mislabel that as sexual arousal. I'm going to say that another time. The combination in the organs, in the reproductive organs, are fear, shock, children are shocked, they are afraid, they are ashamed. That arousal becomes mislabeled, here we are with language, mislabeled as sex. That it becomes incredibly confusing. These are some time-lapse brain scans from Jaggi, the chief of brain imaging at Child Psychiatric Branch at the National Institute of Health. At age 5, we see the gray matter wanes as the brain matures. We see it here until 15 years. Brain development is processed in 5 images showing a shift: red, the least mature, to blue, the most mature. Children cannot experience sex as sex education in schools. Elementary, middle school, high school. The areas depicted in red, green, yellow are very undeveloped. The area in blue has completed approximately half of the basic development, and the one in bright lavender are developmentally mature. These areas have completed their developmental functions. When do children get sex education? Are they prepared for that? Not at all. Not at all. Teenage brain, self-control center. It's supposed to risk-taking control, impulse control, emotional control, self-restraint, judgment. Those are not yet developed. They get venereal diseases when they are experiencing sex education. They have out-of-wedlock pregnancies. They have emotional trauma. We are talking about massive brain damage for these children when they're exposed to sex education. In the United States, we say lower sexual grooming children. We lower sexual inhibitions. We indicate that it is all right to have sex. Then, this is for grooming. Pedophiles who are grooming children. That is the way they groom children. Then demonstrate sex acts to them, pornography, how to masturbate, how to perform oral and sex or engage in sexual intercourse, and show them naked pictures of children, other children, show them children with adults, and that tell them it's perfectly normal. The human brain is not designed to be able to maintain these kinds of images. And these are in the books. These are in the books in the United States, the United Kingdom. They have worse. Thank you. So, an organization has evolved to not touch the children. There is a website now up, stopkinseyinstitute.org. There is I have this, the C-SPAN did a two-hour lecture of mine, which is available. I say to you, please, you must have the information. read the books. It's in Croatian, one of them, and view the Kinsey Syndrome, Kinsey's Pedophiles, which was produced by Tim Tate, and join the coalition that is theinstitute.org, Save the Children, and thank you.
Thank you very much for this very challenging lecture. Možda bi bilo dobro za one koji nisu sve shvatili, opet uzimam slobodu pa ću kratko sažeti ono što smo čuli. Evo, to nije bilo dogovoreno, ali gospođa jedna mi je došla prigovoriti zašto nemamo prijevod. Kad bismo imali simultano prevođenje, onda bismo prekidali naše predavače. Dakle, kratko, profesorica Reisman izvodi tezu da je na temelju Kinseyevih istraživanja za vrijeme Drugog svjetskog rata, nakon Drugog svjetskog rata, posebno 70-ih godina, došlo do hiperseksualizacije društva koje se reperkutiralo i na hiperseksualizaciju odnosa prema djeci i prema mladima. Tako da je 70-ih godina došlo do pojave dječje pornografije koja je bila recimo objavljivana u časopisu Playboy pa i u nekim drugim medijima i koja je u to vrijeme bila nešto što se smatralo smiješnim, politim, poticajnim i dobrodošlim u svakodnevnoj razbibrizi. Onda doktorica Reisman provlači dalje, dakle, rezultate Kinseyevih istraživanja kao osnovu za brojne seksualne devijacije kojima su djeca izložena bila kroz prethodna desetljeća i kraj 20. stoljeća, a to je, dakle, u svakom slučaju seksualni abuzus djece koji nije uopće bio rijetkost, pa zatim trgovina djecom, dječja prostitucija i tako dalje. Onda nam je pokazala onu vrlo instruktivnu tablicu iz jednog Kinseyevog istraživanja koja vrlo rječito svima objašnjava kako su ta istraživanja bila utemeljena. Dakle, na toj tablici, a nema razloga da ne vjerujemo da ona nije vjerodostojna, ona je skenirana valjda iz neke knjige. Iz njegove knjige vidimo, dakle, da su obavljani eksperimenti na djeci različite dobi, od, ako se ne varam, 5. mjeseca života, pa onda do djece starije dobi, tinejdžera, adolescenata i tako dalje. I ta djeca su recimo bila izvrgavana seksualnim stimulusima, dakle ekvivalentu masturbacije i drugim nekim seksualnim zlostavljanjima u biti, koja su u te djece izazivala uzbuđenost, vrlo često plać, onesvješćivanje i tako dalje, a oni koji su to promatrali i koji su obavljali te eksperimente na djeci su bilježili njihove reakcije koje su prozvali orgazmom. Pa onda tako u toj tablici smo mogli vidjeti da četverogodišnji dječak može doživjeti 26 orgazama u 24 sata. Dakle, jasno je da je surovost takvog eksperimentalnog pristupa na ljudima nešto što je potpuno ekvivalentno najsurovijim eksperimentima koje su provodili liječnici u vrijeme nacističke Njemačke. A ovi su se eksperimenti provodili u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama otprilike u isto vrijeme. Potom je temeljem Kinseyevih istraživanja osnovan Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality, dakle Institut za napredne studije ljudske seksualnosti, u kojima, dakle na tom studiju, u toj instituciji su oni koji su bili nastavnici vrlo praktično, vrlo zorno prakticirali različite seksualne tehnike i seksualne radnje sa svojim studentima, s polaznicima tog instituta. To je otprilike valjda ekvivalent kao što kad učite psihoanalizu, onda imate svog vlastitog psihoanalitičara. Tako je ovo bilo studij koji je dubinski trebao proučavati seksualne navade i onda je podrazumijevao prakticiranje seksa sa svojim profesorima. Koliko je to izvitopereno, mislim da nije potrebno posebno komentirati. Pa ste vidjeli sliku jednog dekana takvog instituta, pa ste vidjeli sliku direktora takvog instituta, i tako. No, evo, sad ću ja biti kratak. 2011. godine je izašao neki članak, kako se ne varam, o tome da u Hrvatskoj, Grčkoj i Poljskoj nije dostatno razvijen seksualni odgoj mladeži, ali istodobno je poznato da je u tim zemljama bilo najmanje abuzusa seksualnog djece, najmanje abortusa i tako dalje. Kasnije smo vidjeli neka istraživanja razvoja mozga koja potječu instituta za zdravlje Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, gdje ste vidjeli kako se ljudski korteks, odnosno siva supstanca, razvija tijekom vremena. I vidjeli ste da je doista ljudski mozak organ koji se razvija negdje do 20-25. godine i kako su određeni seksualni stimulusi u doba vrlo mladog ljudskog mozga, dakle u ranom djetinjstvu, nešto što je potpuno nefiziološko i nešto što u biti se može napasti i na temelju sasvim organskih, čvrstih pokazatelja o tome kako se u ovakvom slučaju neprimjerenih eksperimenata atakira potpuno nezreo ljudski mozak za bilo kakve seksualne odnošaje, a kamoli za nekakve kontrolirane masturbacije ili nešto slično. Posljedica Kinseyevih istraživanja je preuranjena seksualizacija društva koja ima direktne nepovoljne posljedice na djecu koja prerano stupaju u seksualne odnose, kada nisu emocionalno zrela, kad se ne mogu racionalno ponašati u smislu da se suzdrže kad je to vjerojatno mudro i za njihovo zdravlje, za prevenciju spolnih bolesti i za njihov psihički život. I to zapravo uzrokuje ozbiljne seksualne poremećaje koje onda tu djecu kasnije kad odrastu naravno prati kroz čitav život. I seksualna devijantnost je nešto što je prema tezi doktorice Reisman posljedica preuranjenog, neprimjerenog seksualnog odgoja, gdje se maloj djeci u osnovnoj školi objašnjava što je to oralni seks, objašnjava se kako treba raditi masturbaciju, objašnjava se kako izgleda seksualni čin i sve se to interpretira kao nešto što je potpuno normalno, bezopasno i nema nikakvog razloga da se u to ne uđe onda kad se osjeti nekakav poriv. Eto, ako ja mogu slobodno interpretirati ovo što smo čuli, to bi bilo to. Ispričavam se ako sam prenio nešto krivo, ali mislim da je osnovna ideja prenijeta, za one koji nisu mogli pratiti originalno predavanje. Thank you very much.
I don't have too much to add to what's already been said. I'm not a medical professional like most of you, or a journalist like Tim. I'm not a scholar like Dr. Reisman. I'm an investigator. I've spent the last 45 years of my life investigating predators of all kinds. And for the last 35 years, I've had a particular interest in investigating child sexual predators. My interest was prompted by accident. In the late 1970s, the Illinois state agency that I worked for was assigned to investigate allegations of young girls being of young girls from cities like Minneapolis, Chicago, Detroit, being literally snatched from their mother's arms and turned into prostitutes on the streets of New York City. Organized crime reportedly was behind this illegal sex trafficking. Our agency was charged with investigating the case because we had a special focus on organized crime intelligence.
Mike,
is it on?
Is it closer?
Closer? Okay, sorry. I don't like to have things this close. chief investigator for the agency, As chief investigator for the agency, I was assigned to plan out the investigation. I won't go into too much detail about what we found on the investigation because it lasted for 5 years. But what we did determine was that traditional organized crime was not involved in this trafficking that had been identified at that time. We found a different group that was involved, and it was a pedophile underground. First, we discovered that there were loose networks of almost exclusively of men who formed relationships based on their particular deviant interests. Now, they traded access to children, and they traded photographs of minors as well with each other. The development of the internet has allowed this kind of practice to become global in scope. Second, we learned that it wasn't just girls who were involved in the street prostitution. An even bigger problem involved the prostitution of boys. In the 70s, girls and boys literally walked the streets to sell themselves, but today this has gone largely behind closed doors. It's done on the internet using, in the United States, there's a variety of websites that you can go to make connections with these girls, and it's also now available on iPhone apps. They have special apps that you can use. Particularly the boys use an app for just literally instant hookups that shows the location of people. If somebody's interested, they can contact the boy and they'll go and meet with him. In the late 70s, we had no idea how big this problem was. It was an unknown territory that we had gone into. We only presumed it was organized crime because it seemed to be fairly substantial. Nevertheless, we presumed at the time that it was small, and we constructed a model for proactively investigating and arresting child sexual predators. That model now is being used by law enforcement agencies all over the world, and thousands of predators are being arrested. But it isn't enough. Law enforcement will never be the sole solution to this problem. It's too big, and it's getting a lot bigger. Just as an example of how inadequate law enforcement is in dealing with this issue, I cite the example of boylover.net. This online network was disrupted by an international coalition of law enforcement a few years ago. However, of the 70,000 members who were involved in this internet network, and their interest happened to be in children below 5 years old. They weren't interested in anybody older than 5, and they traded kids, they traded photographs only of kids that were 5 years or less. Of all those that they've identified as being involved in this network, only 184 of these men have been prosecuted to date worldwide. The rest are still at large. And this is only one of thousands of such networks. The growth of this problem is fueled by the Kinsey-promoted sexualization of our society. 3 specific positions taken by Kinsey are of particular concern. The first is that children are sexual from birth. And the second, that children have a right to sexual expression and have a right to choose when and with whom they're going to have sex. The third, that pornography not only is addictive or damaging, or not addictive or damaging, but that viewing pornography is healthy even for children. These 3 things are the core of what the problem is when you see it out on the street. The promotion of these ideas throughout society has led directly to the efforts to reduce the age of consent to the introduction of so-called comprehensive sexuality education programs in schools. And comprehensive may sound good, but it's by no means comprehensive. It's a falsehood even to use that term. It also has led to the hypersexualization of our society and our culture, and to making childhood innocence a thing of the past. Indirectly, it's led to an explosion of childhood STDs, teen pregnancies, and abortions, and to the commercial sexual exploitation of children to become so huge that it's overwhelmed the capability of law enforcement to deal with it. And that's everywhere. It's not just in any one country. The global law enforcement community is completely incapable of dealing with this issue. The worst of the pedophiles, the serial child sexual predators, abuse the vast majority of child victims. They're responsible for about 88% of the children who are sexually abused. Each one of them in their lifetime will abuse an average of 150 children. Studies have documented that between 6% and 50% of the victims go on to become predatory themselves. Even using the lowest estimate, and one of the problems is that these figures are not real good, the studies have not been very well done, and it is, after all, a very hidden problem. But even using the lowest estimate of 6%, that means that each serial predator will create 9 more just exactly like him. Now I tell you, if you have any hope for your children or your grandchildren, your nieces or nephews, to have a healthy future, this situation that I've described has to change, and we need to start doing it right now. I think now, are you gonna, I'm done.
Evo, ovo je bilo kratko, ali vrlo jasno i vrlo zanimljivo. Lijepo se nadovezuje na ono što smo čuli. Dakle, istraživanje seksualnosti djece smatra se, kao što vidite, kontroverznim u Hrvatskoj, kaže izvješće Kinseyevog instituta za našu domovinu. Jel? Molim? On je to izvijestio. Ok. Sad ovako, dakle, sad smo čuli nešto od pravnika, istražitelja, osobe koja je godinama bila posvećena razotkrivanju različite vrste kriminala, kao što sam rekao, od političke korupcije do seksualnog iskorištavanja, poglavito djece. I on je, dakle, 70. godina bio svjedokom prostitualiziranja velikog broja djece u nekim američkim gradovima, Chicagu, New Yorku i tako dalje. Isto tako otmicama djece da bi se ona seksualno iskorištavala. Dakle, 70. godina u američkim gradovima bili su stotine djece koja su se prostituirala, i dječaka i djevojčica. Danas je to mnogo perfidnije nego što je bilo 70. godina. Internet je olakšao pedofilima realizaciju njihovih želja i olakšao je tajnost svega toga što se danas odvija iza zatvorenih vrata i što je mnogo masovnije nego što je bilo 70. i 80. godina. Kao primjer, čuli smo da postoji, recimo, organizacija koja se zove BoyLover.net, dakle, vjerojatno neki portal, neki Boy Lover, sad sam rekao, pardon, Boy Lover.net. Yeah. I love bass, you know. I love to say. Taj Boy Lover.net broji 70.000 članova i među njima je većina djece u dobi manje od 5 godina. Dakle, to su uglavnom dječaci. 70.000 članova, među njima je privedeno i procesuirano svega 184 člana. Dakle, primjer kako je to zapravo vrlo problematično i kako je teško operativno djelovati i sprječavati takve rabote. A sve je to posljedica, opet čuli smo, hiperseksualizacije društva temeljem Kinseyevih istraživanja i tvrdnje, koja se temelja njegovim istraživanjima, da su djeca seksualna bića od rođenja, da djeca imaju pravo na seksualnu ekspresiju i na seksualne odnose kad god to procijene da im je prikladno i da je zapravo pornografija nešto što je zdravo, ne samo za odrasle nego i za djecu, jer poučava o seksu. Danas je svijet prepunjen seksualnim predatorima, takozvanim, koji iskorištavaju djecu. Svaki taj predator u svom životu iskoristi oko 150 djece, otprilike, u prosjeku. Jedan takav seksualni predator kreirat će, to kažu današnji istraživači, 9 novih takvih predatora koje je prethodno bio seksualno iskoristio ili iskorištavao. I sad, naravno, postavlja se pitanje kako to spriječiti danas, što s time učiniti, je li seksualni odgoj u djece primjeren ili primjeren u našim školama i jesmo li možda, zahvaljujući ovim potpuno besramnim Kinseyjevim istraživanjima i zaključcima koje je proizveo iz tih istraživanja, došli do toga da se vrlo teško nosimo s hiperseksualiziranom mladeži koja rano stupa u seksualne odnose, koja oboljeva od spolnih bolesti, koja doživljava traume jer su mentalno nepripremljeni za spolne odnose, a u njih ulaze. I očito ako želimo učiniti bolji svijet i omogućiti bolju budućnost našoj djeci i našim unucima, onda se moramo duboko zamisliti nad ovim što smo večeras čuli. Eto, to je s moje strane. Of course, that was applause for our speakers, not for us. And now we can open discussion, if you like. Certainly you do. Yes, please.
I'd like to ask, you talked about research on children.
A little bit louder, please, and we can bring you a mic, yes.
Hello. You talked about research on children. Is there anything as controversial in his research on men and women, or males and females, as he called them? And the second question is, was there any opposition to his ideas at the time, especially considering the fact that the transition was not slow and subtle, but radical and revolutionary? His ideas, I think you described them as revolutionary, so why was there no opposition to them?
Hi. You keep that. Yeah. Well, no. His research was completely fraudulent. Completely. He reported on women. He said, "Oh, please, really." He said he interviewed 4,441 women, and none of them were ever really harmed by rape. Okay? Now, I know from my old, I know that at that period, things were certainly a lot better. Women were not experiencing, you didn't need a rape whistle in college, that sort of thing. Do you need rape whistles here? Oh, wait. Yeah, because in our colleges, the girls, we say not girls, they're women. I think they're girls, but anyway, they need rape whistles. So that kind of data, where did he get such things, right? Where? Besides, please get the book and read it, and it's all documented in there as to the percentage of abnormal, aberrant people in those years who he called average American guys, average American women. He reported on abortions. How did he know? Abortions were illegal. He reported on, and he said that there were very few. He reported on not just the children, but the men and the women. The whole thing was riddled with fraud. Nothing at all that we could call legitimate research, which you would expect if you would conduct the kind of thing he did with the children in criminal activity. And so, Tim, did you want to handle the last part? And a lot of criticism there was.
Stuff on child sexuality is primarily one chapter in the first book. No, there was no publicity, no one seemed to see it. It was there in plain sight. It was hiding in plain sight. When I was first told about this in 1997, I said, no, it can't be right. I don't like Kinsey. I looked at it, and it's there. It's his own words, it's black and white. I had the same response from the network, the television network in the UK. They said, well, that can't be right. So I just gave them the book. And they said, oh, it is there. It's there, it's been there all along. Why didn't it get picked up? Because I think people saw what they wanted to see in newspapers and television, told you what they wanted you to see.
Yeah, that's completely true. There was a mass media blitz. It was controlled. Everywhere you read what Kinsey discovered. This is what Kinsey discovered about men, what he discovered about women, and so on. Now, there was criticism, and from much more prestigious scholars than Kinsey, because he was really relatively unknown at the time, and except for this, that there was a great deal of criticism, but you didn't read it in the paper. Sort of like what's been happening here in Zagreb, I thought. Yeah, a little. Anyway, but you didn't read it in the newspaper. It was not in the headlines, or it wasn't at all anywhere. But get the book, and it's all documented in there. Thank you. It was a very good question. Yeah.
Yes, please, more questions. We'll bring you the microphone. Just wait for a while. Which country in the world, upon your opinion, has the best program of sexual education?
Nada. It just doesn't happen. Unless there's somebody who's still living in the 1950s, and they're using the old textbooks, and they say biology, and here's, it's the way I was taught in school. We had sex education, and it was a couple of days or something, and biology, and that was it. Yeah, nada.
Yes, please, more questions.
For the record, my 6 children went through sex education between 1980 something and 1990 something in the UK. I have no idea what it's like now, but at the time I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was quite good.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yes, please. Any personal experience in sexual education during your high school or elementary school?
By the way, that's true to a great extent. I should mention different pockets, with the different teachers would teach their own way, and so some teachers would just teach the biology and whatever, and then others do it completely radically. The problem is now that it's become a uniform, radical sort of thing.
Yes, please. Just with the microphone, if you can.
Okay, so my question question is going to be, well, at first, before I ask my question, I would like to say, from my own experience, especially during elementary school, what problems with sexual educations I found. So, in my elementary school years, I actually saw a great degree of children being exposed to sexually explicit materials. Around the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the elementary school. And it was actually taking the problem was getting bigger and bigger. And, well, it all started with pictures, videos and stuff. But lately, since I entered med school, I had a few people from my elementary school actually approach me with questions concerning sexual health, which were actually quite disturbing. I had a girl from the 8th grade of elementary school ask me if coitus interruptus was a good contraception method. That girl had after that she had problems after that. And my question actually is, what kind of sexual education would you propose, which would actually help children which are more and more in their everyday life exposed to pornographic and other sexual content, which isn't just on the internet. I mean, I had friends in my elementary school who were buying Playboy magazines for their parents without an ID. He just came to the shop and said, okay, I need a Playboy magazine for my dad. Nobody asked the guy for his ID. We have in daily newspapers pornographic pictures. We have ads. Would you like to download pornographic pictures on your mobile phone? So there is a great problem, but how can we deal with it and protect the children now? Because I think that I had sexual education in 3rd grade of high school, which came absolutely too late. And I think it's too late for the children right now who are exposed to this bad content.
Should I? Oh, yeah. Well, we have more and more children early exposed to these pictures, to these things, and they're molesting each other. Some of our, what is it, the percentage now? It used to be 30, now it's 70%, give or take, that we know of, where children are molesting children, and brothers molesting sisters, and so on, brothers molesting brothers, and then the boy thinks he's gay. The rest of his life his brother says, you're gay. Well, yeah, he was molested by his own brother, and so on. So this is a huge, massive problem. I have no fairy wand to wave, because we've let this happen over a period of time. I believe there has to be action taken against all forms of pornography, all forms. It can't be, and I mean in school, as well as what we call formal and informal sex education. Both the pornography shown to the children in school, which is what I was trying to display up there, they simply can't handle. And the pornography on the television and so on. So the first step is the exposure of Kinsey. The first step is if we can actually begin to get the UN investigate Kinsey. We can. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fast. I can offer no band-aids for that.
Izvolite, gospođo doktor.
I'm going to speak in Croatian because, it is better.
Okay. We saw what is the situation, and I would like to propose that from this faculty we gather. We should be one group of people, not necessarily myself, but who would send a letter of concern for the future of our children, and it means the future of all the nation. And
everywhere. So to our minister, who did what he did, he prohibited that any principal of any school come and listen to this lecture anywhere. So it is very seriously doing something against all the nation. So it is my proposal. I don't want to bother you with other things.
Let me comment that taking a stand is very, I think, very important, and hearing from the medical community what the opinion of the medical community may be about this hypersexualization of the children, the exposure of children to these things is, I think, myself, extremely valuable and important.
I have a question. So, what do you think about the hypocritical stance of the APA concerning sexual deviances? In example, they say that selfie is a mental disorder, but they don't recognize the same thing for pedophilia, fetishism, transvestitism, homosexuality, and so on. And psychoanalytic literature has shown over 120 years, or even more, that it is clearly disorder regarding the same-sex parent and peers. If you are familiar with the work of Charles Socrates.
I'm familiar with his work.
He also established a link between pedophilia and pre-Oedipal stage. He also discussed about pedophilia and a criminal background. He did a book with another person discussing this. So what can you say about the stance of the APA?
Well, myself, the APA is really political. Yeah, it's just political. The American Psychological Association or the American Psychiatric Association, both. They're both called APA. And they have they are very influenced by whichever way the wind is blowing. That's why I think it's extremely important for the medical profession to stand alone and to stand outside the APAs, both of them, or any of those kinds of organizations. They just have no relevance.
I'm not a psychiatrist or a member of the APAs, and that's a little above my pay grade. What I would say is that I've spent 25 years investigating paedophiles and pedophilia and child pornography, and I have met and talked to at length many pedophiles. If you make pedophilia legally a mental disorder, you give them a get out of jail free card. I don't think that's a good idea.
Good evening, I'm Davor Jugovic, welcome in Croatia. I just want to please you for coming here in Croatia and wish you all the best, all the luck, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's my second trip. I was here before with Vince and Stapel, and I am very pleased to be here again. I know you had Lila Rose a little while ago, which was a wonderful thing. So you have to keep up that kind of good work. Yeah.
More questions, please, or comments, brief comments?
Come on now. Please.
So, if there are no any more comments, then I think before thanking you, we have to conclude that this was an extremely interesting meeting with 3 world-known experts on the field of child sexuality and child sex abuse. This is a matter of concern, of course, of our School of Medicine, which is the leading medical school in Croatia and should be responsible not only for strictly spoken medical education of medical doctors and postgraduate students, but also for some basic, very serious question we face in our society, and we have to feel a responsibility and feel a sort of task, challenge to make the world better. If the children are abused in any way, then it's not tolerable. We are swearing today that everybody should have rights, that everybody has to be free, with no limits, and basically spoken it's okay, but we have to be aware of one of the most, I think, dangerous against messages, that if the child is a sexual individual from her or his birth, then it should be normal to tolerate sexual behavior among children, sexual relations, and sexual relations between adults and children, because children are sexual individuals. So that's a disaster. And that's the essence. And that's the essential deleterious message we are getting from Kinsey, and we have to fight against that. Thank you very much. Evo, kolegice i kolege, mislim da je ovo bila jedna krasna akademska rasprava, da smo imali vrlo jedinstven susret danas na našem fakultetu i da ćemo ovakav susret vjerojatno upriličiti i u neko buduće dogledno vrijeme. So we are expecting you soon to visit us again. You are very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I should say there are books outside and in Croatian, and I would be happy to sign anything, you know. I would even sign somebody else's name, if you like.
So, thanks to Judith Reisman, Thomas Hampson, and Tim Tate.